What if the deepest truth about you is that you are already whole, but you just don't know it yet? Carl Jung believed that buried beneath the layers of your ego, your roles, and your struggles, there exists a hidden center of the psyche that holds the blueprint of your true self. He called it the self, the archetype of wholeness, balance, and ultimate transformation. Unlike the shadow, which represents what you repress, or the persona, which is a mask you wear, the self is not just a part of you. It is the entirety of you. It is a union of your conscious mind and your unconscious depths, the integration of all your archetypes, instincts, and spiritual longings. Jung saw the self as a guiding force of human life, quietly pulling us toward balance, meaning, and individuation. The self shows up in powerful symbols across every culture and religion. Mandalas, circles, radiant suns, divine figures, sacred centers. All of these, Jung believed, are outer reflections of the self within. And if you pay attention, you may find that your dreams, synchronicities, and inner experiences are constantly pointing you toward this deeper wholeness. In this fourth episode of our series on Carl Jung's Archetypes, we will journey into the heart of Jung's vision, what the self truly is, and how it differs from the ego, how the self manifests in dreams, myths, and symbols of unity, why the self is the goal of the individuation process, the path of becoming whole, the dangers of ignoring the self, and living only from the surface of the ego, and most importantly, how you can begin to recognize and integrate the self in your own life. This is not just theory. It's a roadmap for transformation, because when you connect with the self, you no longer feel lost, fragmented, or incomplete. You begin to sense that there is a deeper intelligence within you, guiding your path, calling you to become the person you were always meant to be. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this video with someone who is searching for meaning, because this journey is not only about knowledge, it's about awakening to your true center. When Carl Jung spoke of the self, he was not describing the same thing as the ego. The ego is a conscious I, the part of you that wakes up, makes choices, holds your memories, and interacts with the world. But the self, according to Jung, is something much greater. It is the center and totality of your psyche, both conscious and unconscious. If the ego is like a small island, the self is the vast ocean that surrounds it. The self is not just who you think you are. It is who you truly are in your entirety. It contains all your archetypes, the hero, the shadow, the persona, the anima and animus, and more. It is the force that seeks to bring all these parts into harmony, like a conductor guiding a symphony of inner voices. Jung often described it as the God within, a spark of divine intelligence that gives direction and meaning to your life. Across cultures, the self has been symbolized in many ways. In Eastern traditions, it is represented by the mandala, a perfect circle reflecting the harmony of the cosmos. In Christianity, it often appears as Christ, the embodiment of divine unity. In alchemy, it is a philosopher's stone, the mysterious element that transforms base metals into gold. Each of these symbols points to the same truth. The self is a hidden center of wholeness that we are destined to discover. But here is the key. The self is not something you become. You already are the self. The journey is not about creating it. It is about realizing it. The problem is that most of us live entirely in our ego. We think our jobs, our names, our roles in society define us. We identify with our successes, our failures, our possessions, and even our wounds. But these are fragments, not the whole picture. The self whispers to us in dreams and symbols, in the strange coincidences we call synchronicities. It is always guiding us, pulling us toward balance, reminding us that we are more than our masks, more than our shadows, more than the roles we play. Jung believed that the discovery of the self is the true purpose of life. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The self is that truth. It is a place within you where all opposites, light and dark, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious, are reconciled. It is the hidden center of your soul. The self is not something you can hold in your hand or measure in a laboratory. It is invisible, yet it constantly makes itself known through symbols, dreams, and life experiences. Jung observed that the self speaks to us in a language beyond logic, the language of images, synchronicities, and inner guidance. But most people overlook these signs, dismissing them as coincidence or imagination. One of the most common symbols of the self is the circle or mandala. Across cultures and religions, the circle has always represented wholeness, eternity, and the union of opposites. From Tibetan sand mandalas to the rose windows of cathedrals, from the wheel of Dharma to the halo of saints, humanity has been unconsciously drawing and worshiping the image of the self for thousands of years. When you dream of circles, spirals, or symmetrical patterns, Jung believed it is the self trying to communicate with you, reminding you of the center that holds your life together. The self also manifests in archetypal figures. In dreams, it may appear as a wise old man, a divine child, or a radiant being of light. In Christianity, Jung often pointed to Christ as the supreme symbol of the self, the union of human and divine, mortal and eternal. In Eastern traditions, the self is reflected in the image of Atman, or the inner Buddha nature, the timeless essence that transcends the ego. But the self does not only reveal itself in sacred symbols, it also speaks through synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that feel too precise to be random. Have you ever thought of someone, only to have them call you seconds later? Or read a phrase in a book that seems to answer the exact question you were asking in your heart? Jung believed these were messages from the self, guiding you toward alignment with your deeper purpose. The manifestation of the self can even feel like a crisis. Sometimes when life breaks down, when careers collapse, relationships end, or health fails, the self pushes us to confront what we have ignored. It uses disruption to wake us up, to pull us back to the path of wholeness. So, the self reveals itself in many ways, through symbols of unity, through archetypal figures, through synchronicities, and even through life's challenges. The question is, will you recognize its call, or will you dismiss it as coincidence? For Jung, the ultimate purpose of human life was not success, wealth, or even happiness. It was individuation. Individuation is a lifelong process of becoming whole, of integrating the different parts of the psyche into harmony. And at the center of this journey stands a self. The ego likes to believe it is in charge, but in Jung's view, the ego is only a fragment of the greater self. Individuation begins when the ego realizes it is not the master, but the servant of a deeper intelligence within. This realization often comes during crises, moments when a life we've carefully constructed no longer satisfies us. We begin to feel empty, restless, or drawn towards something beyond our ordinary existence. Jung saw these moments as the self calling us to awaken. The process of individuation involves confronting and integrating the shadow, recognizing the mass of the persona, reconciling the polarities of the anima and animus, and ultimately surrendering to the larger pattern of the self. Each archetype is like a gatekeeper, and passing through them leads us closer to our center. The self is both the path and the destination. It is the one guiding the process and the one we finally discover. Across mythologies, we see this journey reflected in the hero's quest. The hero ventures into the unknown, faces trials, confronts monsters, the shadow, meets guides, the anima/animus, and finally returns transformed, carrying wisdom back to community. This story, Jung argued, is not just fiction. It is a blueprint of individuation written into the human soul. The hero is the ego, but the treasure they seek is the self. When individuation progresses, the self becomes more visible. We begin to see life not as random chaos, but as a meaningful pattern. Our dreams align with our waking life. Synchronicities increase, and we feel guided by an inner compass. We also experience greater balance. Instead of being torn between extremes, logic and emotion, strength and vulnerability, ambition and rest, we find a center that unites opposites. The self's role in individuation is like gravity. It quietly pulls everything toward balance. No matter how far we wander into fragmentation, the self calls us back to wholeness. To heed this call is to live a life of depth, authenticity, and meaning. To ignore it is to remain divided, incomplete, and restless. Jung warned that ignoring the self comes at a high cost. The self is not just a concept. It is the inner compass of your psyche. To live disconnected from it is like trying to navigate the ocean without a map or a star to guide you. You may keep moving, but you will always feel lost. The first danger of ignoring the self is inflation of ego. When the ego believes it is the center of the psyche, it tries to control everything. It identifies itself with achievements, possessions, or roles. But because the ego is only a fragment, this control never lasts. Eventually, life shatters the illusion through failure, loss, or crisis, and the ego collapses. Without connection to the self, these moments feel meaningless, leaving a person empty and broken. Another danger is existential emptiness. Many people live outwardly successful lives, good jobs, families, recognition, yet feel a deep void inside. This void is the voice of the self being ignored. It whispers, "This is not all. There's more to you than this mask." When we drown out that voice, depression, anxiety, and even physical illness can appear. Jung often said that neurosis is a suffering of a soul that has not discovered its meaning. Ignoring the self also creates fragmentation. Instead of uniting the different parts of your psyche, you remain at war with yourself, torn between desires and fears, instincts and morals, logic and emotion. Without the self to bring order, these forces pull you in opposite directions, leaving you exhausted and confused. Perhaps the most subtle danger is missing your destiny. Jung believed each person carries an inner pattern, a unique path that the self seeks to unfold. If you ignore it, you may live according to society's expectations, but never touch the deeper purpose of your existence. You survive, but you do not truly live. The self does not remain silent forever. If ignored too long, it often forces its way into awareness, through nightmares, synchronicities, or life events that disrupt your plans. What looks like chaos from the outside is sometimes the self demanding to be recognized. To ignore the self is to ignore your own soul. And no matter how far you run, the self will always call you back, sometimes gently, sometimes with thunder. If the self is the hidden center of our being, how can we integrate it into daily life? Jung emphasized that integration is not about reaching the self as if it were a distant goal. Instead, it is about recognizing that the self has always been present, quietly guiding us toward wholeness. The task is not to create the self, but to align with it. The first step is listening to its language. The self speaks through symbols, dreams, synchronicities, and inner promptings. Pay attention to recurring patterns, powerful dreams, or meaningful coincidences. They are messages from the deeper layers of your psyche. Journaling, dream analysis, or simply reflecting on these signs allows the unconscious to enter your conscious awareness. The second step is balancing opposites. The self seeks unity, not division. That means acknowledging both light and shadow, reason and emotion, masculine and feminine, strength and vulnerability. Each time you integrate an opposite instead of rejecting it, you move closer to the self. For example, when you allow yourself to be both ambitious and compassionate, both logical and intuitive, you begin to embody wholeness. The third step is living authentically. The self calls us away from masks and superficial roles, urging us to live in alignment with our true essence. This doesn't mean abandoning responsibilities, but rather approaching them from a place of inner truth. When your outer life reflects your inner center, you feel a sense of meaning that no external achievement can replace. Another path is creative and spiritual practice. Jung often encouraged people to engage with art, mandalas, meditation, and mythology as ways to connect with the self. These practices bypass the rational ego and allow direct contact with the unconscious. They help us experience the self not just as an idea, but as a living presence. Finally, integration means surrender. The ego must accept that it is not the ultimate authority. It is a part of a larger whole. This surrender is not weakness, but liberation. When the ego aligns with the self, life begins to flow with greater harmony. Decisions feel guided, challenges become opportunities for growth, and even suffering gains meaning. Integrating the self is the essence of individuation. It is a journey of becoming who you truly are, not by denying parts of yourself, but by uniting them. The self is already within you, waiting to be recognized, honored, and lived. We have reached the heart of Jung's vision. The self, the archetype of wholeness and transformation. Unlike the shadow, the persona, or even the anima and animus, the self is not just another piece of psyche. It is the center and the totality, the hidden pattern that holds your life together. It is the force that has been guiding you since the beginning, calling you toward balance, authenticity, and meaning. The self is the reason you are drawn to symbols of unity, the mandala, the circle, the radiant sun. It is the whisper behind your dreams, the architect of synchronicities, the presence you feel in moments of deep silence. Even when life falls apart, the self is there, using crisis not to punish you but to awaken you. We've seen how the self manifests in symbols and archetypes, how it guides the process of individuation, and how dangerous it is to ignore its call. A life lived only from the ego may seem successful, but without connection to the self, it eventually feels hollow and directionless. The self is the missing piece that gives life depth and meaning. But perhaps the most important truth is this: you are not separate from the self. You are the self. The journey is not about becoming something new. It is about remembering what has always been within you. As Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. So, I want to ask you, have you ever felt guided by something greater within you? Have you noticed a symbol, a dream, or a synchronicity that seemed to point you toward your true path? Share your experience in the comments below, because your story might inspire someone else who is also searching for meaning. And if this video resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because in the next and final episode of this series, we will bring everything together. We'll explore how Jung's archetypes connect in the grand journey of individuation, the path of becoming whole. The self is the center of your being. It has been guiding you all along. The question is, will you listen?